The charisma of Francisco and Jacinta in such a short time is a great challenge, but it is also a very beautiful task. They are two very different children.
They both lived in equal depth the message of Fatima, centered on devotion to Mary's heart. In Jacinta, what touches me most and affects me most is precisely this attention to others.
This is one of the fundamental traits of Jacinta, her sense of solidarity, whether to the real poor that she would find along the way.
They made it all for the sinners. The sacrifices they made, the attention, was all laid out for it.
So the highlight for Jacinta, this great sense of commitment, and we have as legend of the sanctuary, share with joy as Jacinta did.
The holiness is one, it's true, but each one lives holiness according to their own way of being.
Francisco was a little boy focused on what was essential. He captured the beauty of God.
He hears the message and pays particular attention to God and the consolation of God.
He lived in a divine obsession with God's own being, whom he found present in that light that Our Lady transmitted to them.
His character was very introspective.
So Francisco was the consolator of Jesus.
Lucia said that she often thought he was careless because in games, for example, he was not interested in winning.
He was a boy that knew how to accept his condition. He can teach us so much, can't he? In a world as competitive as ours today, where everybody has to be the best, the prettiest, the most perfect, the best football player, Francisco accepts his limits. He accepts that God has wanted that story for him. I met Sister Lucia personally by the end of her life.
I met her and talked with her and even corresponded with her. I met Sister Lucia.
I remember the first time I talked to her alone. The mother came to me and asked me if I wanted to talk to her. I had arrived here just a couple of days, and I always had this intense wish to talk to Sister Lucia of Fatima. And at that moment, when the mother asked me if I wanted to talk to her, I thought, but what will I tell her? What I remember from her was an extreme simplicity and joy. In Sister Lucia, joy was a characteristic very much of her own.
But what is important is to know that Sister Lucia has a prodigious memory, a very great composure when writing. I believe that Lucia basically wanted to give us a testimony, something she lived.
For her, it was the great mission, the message of Fatima. It was the mission of her life. And she was a very funny, very wise and very down-to-earth woman. I remember a short story told to me by Father Condor from the last visit he made to Sister Lucia. I think it was in January 2005. Lucia died a month after that, and Father Condor went to the convent and told me that someone had taken to Lucia a small bag with lupin beans, which by the end of her life was the only thing she really enjoyed to eat. So Father Condor arrived there, and the lupin beans were there, and he says, "Look, Sister Lucia, you can make some sacrifice so that this case may move forward, or for the canonization to come through. For instance, don't eat the lupin beans."
Imagine, we started asking her, "Sister Lucia, do you want fruit? No. Do you want soup? No. Do you want this or that? No. I want lupins." She opened her eyes. "Oh, where are the lupins?" We immediately went to a bar, to a pub, to get some lupins. She ate them and improved.
She looked at him, grabbed the bag and said, "You can do the sacrifices, Father Condor." And she ate the lupin beans. She was this simple and very well-natured woman. I had imagined a very special person, very distant, different from other persons. When I met her, she wasn't at all like that. She was a completely normal person, very simple, very happy, very close. Francisco and Jacinta were the youngest in this family of 7 brothers, born to Mr. Marto and Mrs. Olympia de Jesus, and they were perfectly normal children. So much so that since a very young age, they would go out herding the sheep. They were very poor. Their parents were farmers, and their mother worked at the house and looked after their children and those from their neighbors, a habit in Aljustrel. The children liked to play. They were all in all perfectly normal children. Francisco enjoyed playing the pipe, as we know, and Jacinta had a special taste for dancing and for going to dances. The 2 children were very close to each other, and despite their closeness, their natures were very different. Jacinta was livelier, more spontaneous, but also more whimsical. Before the apparitions, Jacinta is a capricious, spoiled child, very focused on herself. She would appreciate when all her wishes were granted and would sulk when that did not happen. Francisco was quieter, more docile. He would not mind losing when playing games, but he really liked Jacinta. In fact, he would follow her everywhere, and she loved her brother. Lucia was different. She was also the youngest daughter in the family. Many of her brothers would leave for work in the fields, and the sisters would have other jobs, weaving, for instance. So Lucia was a kind of a leader, and wherever she would go, their cousins would follow. It was an extremely pious family. The mother was the matriarch of the family. She was the one giving orders, either in social life or in religious life, and possibly also in the working life, having a lot of love for the truth. I believe Mrs. Maria Rosa was also present, if you consider the narratives of the apparitions or Sister Lucia's memoirs. The drama of Mrs. Maria Rosa was that her daughter might be lying. She had this love for truth, and she would say, "None of my children has ever lied to me, and now the younger one lies, and in a matter like this." One of the things she really regretted was that her mother, for instance, had never believed in her, and she would say that she felt sorry for her mother to the end, when she said goodbye to her the last time they were together, because she would have told her, "Go, my child, because if it's true what you say, you will be happy, but if it's not, you will be miserable." And she would reply, "I am very happy." The first apparition of the angel occurred in the spring of 1916 to Francisco, Jacinta and Lucia. They were at Loca do Cabeço. They were herding the sheep and had finished praying their rosary, probably as it was prayed at that time, a kind of faster rosary. They would not pray the Hail Mary in full, but rather just Hail Mary, Saint Mary, Hail Mary, Saint Mary. They were there when, as Lucia describes it, they felt a gush of wind. So the angel's apparitions start with this feeling of wind. And they looked and they saw this figure of 14, 15-year-old youngster, and always according to Lucia's description, very bright as if made of crystal, or as a mirror trespassed by sunlight. Probably there was a moment of fear, but not that type of fear that scares or frightens you, rather a fear caused by the presence of something supernatural, very intense.
The apparition of the angel they experienced was the strongest they had, overwhelming.
And this is one of the differentiating and curious aspects between the apparitions of the angel and the ones of Our Lady.
It is said that Lucia tells us that the shepherds, after seeing the angel, remained for several days without being able to move.
They were overwhelmed. On the other hand, the apparitions of Our Lady would leave them radiant with joy.
Following Our Lady's apparitions, they were just playing.